Betty Before X is written by, I'm not sure if I say it right, Ilyasah Shabazz with Renee Watson. And I'm sorry, I don't know if I say her name right. Ilyasah is the middle daughter of Malcolm X and his wife Betty. There's 6 daughters in total. And Renee Watson is a really highly acclaimed young adult and children's book writer. She wrote a picture book, Harlem's Little Songbird. She won a Newbery Honor for Piecing Me Together. I mean, she's just like kind of a fabulous writer. And so it's no surprise that this book is really, really amazing. And I'm going to start kind of a little bit backwards, because at the very end of the story, like this is the only illustration or photograph. And this is a photograph of young Betty as a young woman. You know, I'm not sure of the exact age, but, maybe like early teenager or tween. And, you just get the impression of, she's a very, strong and beautiful young woman. And when you go back and you hear her story, which is kind of written in a way that you really feel like you're right there, like in the moment, seeing the world through Betty's eyes. And she had a difficult childhood. She was born to a mother who was 16 years old, so like a very young mother, and was in the South when she was 2 years old, her aunt was visiting and noticed bruises on 2-year-old Betty's neck, and sort of figured out that the mom was abusing her physically and took her away. And so the aunt raised Betty with a lot of love, and thank God for that. But then I think after about 6 years, the aunt passed away. And so then she has to relocate to Detroit, where the mother is now. The mother has remarried. Her stepfather has 2 boys that are younger than she is, and her mother and the stepfather have 3 girls, also much younger. And so she's living in Detroit in these circumstances, and still there's just something like the reason why I go back to the photograph is my personal theory is that Betty just looked a lot like her biological father, like both the way she looked physically and then maybe also her personality. And obviously that relationship probably did not end well, and so perhaps when the mother views Betty, there's all this sort of pent-up anger and hostility that Betty bears, even though, of course it's not related to her. And so she's living with her mother and stepfather and all the kids, and, she's not being treated the same. Her mother's kind of has a volatile temper, and Betty doesn't really feel loved or wanted, and spends about 4 years living with the mother. So in this story, it's sort of more the tail end that she's living with her mother, because again, there's like a big incident, and then this time a neighbor decides that she's going to take Betty and raise her with her husband. So they're like single, maybe slightly older than her actual mother, and they don't have any children of their own. And the father and the husband is a successful small business owner. He owns a shoe repair shop, and it's living with this family, and really their surrogate daughter, that like also really shapes Betty, because the mother is the wife. Okay, it's Lorenzo and Helen Malloy. The wife is and the husband are activists and work with the community to try to get them to spend their dollars on African-owned businesses because of all the racism in Detroit. And the Malloys are belong to the same church as Ollie Mae, who is Betty's mother. But the church is more than just like a church or a place of worship. It's also kind of it's a pretty famous place. It has, like programs to train people. It has it gives loans. It's sort of like a centerpiece for African American, sort of like civil rights movement, like post civil rights? I'm not sure, but sort of that ilk. And so anyway, so Betty goes on to live with this family, and you could kind of see how both the aunt and the Malloys inject into Betty like a lot of positive affirmations about how beautiful she is and how smart she is. And I feel like that really kind of both the troubles that she faced, but also the strength that she got from these two surrogate parents is sort of what forged in Betty this sort of incredible resilience and inner strength, and sort of her commitment to social justice, because it touches on it a little bit in the back, but because this really is the story before she met Malcolm X, and it does go into how she goes to college and she gets a degree, but then in the very, very end, sort of like there's sort of a lot of little snippets. We learn that after Malcolm X was assassinated, Betty has 6 small girls to raise, and she ends up getting another master's degree, a PhD. She becomes a professor. And all this time, she's sort of hounded by not just the Brothers of Islam and the FBI, but I mean, she's sort of under scrutiny. Like, there's just a lot of pressure on her. But here's a woman who can handle it with grace and strength and dignity, and just goes on to be a force, like as a social activist in her community and all over the world. And it's not surprising that the wife of a leader such as Martin Luther King Jr. or Malcolm X would have such a strong and capable wife. But I mean, I just feel like she's really an exceptional person, and this story is so well told. I'm sure it really helps that it's her daughter who really drew on research and memories from relatives and from neighbors, back in Detroit and just all over. But the way also it's written, some chapters are longer, some chapters are shorter, but it's very well woven together into a cohesive unit, and you really do feel like you're watching Betty go through this. It's almost like a play. But it is a really excellent book. A lot of people have this on their Newbery shortlist for the upcoming ALA Awards. I definitely would put it on my list as well. But I hope everyone reads it, because it's just such a great story, and it's true, and it's written by her daughter, and it's a pretty amazing book.